U.S. to pursue my education and to pursue a career path. Like many immigrants, I went to a really good school here and studied architectural design and began on a career path and was living the American dream. And I worked for Fortune 500 companies for a short time. I even worked at the World Trade Center towers for a good 4 years, and I was on the 106th floor of those towers. So I had intimate knowledge of Lower Manhattan, and my husband was the imam of a mosque very close to Ground Zero, about 12 blocks from there. So Lower Manhattan and Tribeca and that entire neighborhood was our neighborhood. But before 9/11, my husband and I had started the American Society for Muslim Advancement, partly to address the issue of faith and modernity, and to be a place where young Muslims who are exploring their spirituality could find a home, a place where they could ask really tough questions, a place where they could not feel, that judgment was being passed on them. Because I had struggled in my own spirituality, so I wanted to create a home for others who were, following that same trajectory. And we were doing very well until 9/11 happened. And then our organization had to immediately go from being an in-reach organization to an outreach organization. And we began speaking to churches and synagogues and think tanks and universities and schools and law enforcement agencies, and we were in demand, and people wanted to know who were Muslims and why do you hate us, and all the questions that really we weren't prepared to even answer, because we were so in shock of what had happened, and in shock that somebody who called themselves a Muslim could do this. I feel that we lost a little bit of our innocence, and many Muslims could not imagine that somebody who called himself a Muslim would do something like this. And for a long time, we didn't know how to react. Because we didn't react in the robust manner that Americans would have liked us to react, even though we did react, we sent statements out. People thought that silence is complicit. Why aren't they going out on the streets? Why aren't they, doing like what they've seen in Tahrir Square now? Why aren't they out there marching? And what people didn't realize is that we were in shock. We're a minority community. We are trying to integrate ourselves. And we had not built the kind of institutions that needed to be in place for us to be able to react in that way, and limited resources. So we found ourselves in the middle of all this, and the expectations were very high. So we just found ourselves working what we call in America 24/7. That's what it felt like. We didn't refuse any engagement. We went wherever people asked us, even if it was a church of 20 people or it was a venue of 1,000 people. It didn't matter, because if people wanted us to come and explain, we were there. Ironically, the one thing that was occupying the minds of Americans, which is extremism, has waned, because what happened in the Arab Spring has reshaped the way people think of Muslims now. Because they always thought of Muslims as being extremists and people who didn't want democracy, people who wanted just an Islamic State like Taliban, and that is what they wanted in their societies and communities. And they saw powerful images of people coming out on the streets looking like their own children, with little babies and strollers, and young men coming out and saying, we want democracy, we want freedom, all the things that resonate with Western people they were hearing. And those images were too powerful, and I think it reshaped the perception that at least Americans had of Muslims. And that was the single biggest blow to the extremists, was this revolt all over the Arab world of wanting to take matters into their own hands, because the extremists had done nothing for them. We had always wanted to create a center that was a place of worship, but also a place of service, such as the YMCA had become a place where Bible classes were being held, but also athletics a place that would be open to the general public, and where people could come through various levels of interest. And this is a model that has been very successfully achieved by the Christians in this country, and has now become a template for all over the world, called the YMCAs. And the Jewish community followed suit, and they created the JCCs, Jewish Community Centers, modeled similarly after that, but really talking, expressing Jewish life in America. And we knew that Muslims would have to create a similar institution, a place where critical thinking about Islam can take place, where global issues can be explored, where interfaith collaboration can be taken to a whole new level. And we had called it the Cordova House because we wanted to sort of harken back to that era when Muslims, Christians, and Jews were sharing knowledge with one another, were inspired by each other's philosophies, and it was a culture of learning and expressing faith, not in a competitive way, but really in a more compatible way. So that was the original idea, and when we proposed it at a site that was in our neighborhood, not close to Ground Zero, but in our neighborhood, only blocks away from where we were, it was very quickly embraced by the local community because they saw the benefit and the merit of it. But it was the opposition that is determined to ensure that Muslims don't take root in this country in the same way that Christians and Jews have taken root, in the sense that we should not be allowed to define ourselves in this country, that we should remain a marginalized, minimized, ghettoized community. Well, that's just not who we are. That's not the reality of us. We are very well integrated, we are highly successful, and to prevent us from integrating is doomed to fail. We found ourselves in the midst of a national controversy. We found ourselves becoming an election issue. And all of a sudden we found ourselves embroiled in the kind of controversy that we had never even imagined for ourselves. It's something unimaginable. We were private citizens, and we were treated as if we were public servants. And it was an experience that, now that I look back at it, I'm glad I had that experience, because I learned a lot from it. And in some ways, I learned a lot about human nature. I learned a lot about the struggle of others, which I had never, I'd been empowered by everybody in my family. I was never, marginalized, minimized by anyone. But I began to identify with the struggle of others, the blacks in this country, the civil rights movement, the suffrage movement. And I'm thankful for that, because it's made me a smarter, stronger person. The dream is still very much alive, and the architect in me wants to build this thing at some point in our lives. We are very committed to it, because more than ever, this type of center is needed. More than ever, we need to bring people of religions together to really work together as a coalition for the overall good of society.